Welcome to U.S. Media Power.
It was a cold morning in Washington, the kind of winter air that seeps into the bones and carries the weight of anticipation. Outside the White House, reporters and cameramen assembled, microphones ready, notebooks open, capturing every breath and every shift of the wind. Today, the questions were different from the usual domestic chatter. Today, the world was watching a statement that extended far beyond America's borders. Donald Trump stepped up to the podium, a familiar presence against the backdrop of flags and snow, and spoke of a land that seemed distant, silent, and frozen Greenland. Yet, as his words echoed across the press room, it became clear that this land was anything but inconsequential. Its icy expanse, often overlooked by most of the world, had become a focal point of global strategy, sovereignty debates, and emerging conflicts. What he described was not a mere curiosity. It was a geopolitical pivot on which the Arctic and the Atlantic could very well balance the future of military and economic power. For centuries, Greenland had been more than an isolated Arctic island. It had long captured the imagination of explorers, strategists, and governments. Its location, midway between North America and Europe, placed it at a strategic crossroads. During World War II, when Denmark was occupied by Nazi Germany, the United States moved swiftly to establish bases on Greenland, recognizing its critical position for transatlantic defense and as a launch point for early warning radar systems. Airstrips, radar installations, and military facilities transformed Greenland from a frozen wilderness into a front line in the global fight against fascism. In 1946, the United States even made a formal offer to purchase Greenland, an offer Denmark politely refused. Yet the idea of Greenland as a strategic asset never faded from American military and political planning. As decades passed, the Cold War elevated the island's significance further. Greenland's ice sheets became more than geographical features. They were barriers and shields, offering a vantage point for monitoring missile paths and detecting incoming threats from across the polar routes. In those decades, the Arctic was seen as a buffer and a high-value outpost, where technology and human endurance converged to maintain national security. Even in peacetime, military planners understood that Greenland was not a frozen relic, but a keystone in the architecture of global power. Fast forward to the modern era, when Donald Trump revived the idea of Greenland in his public rhetoric. What had once been quietly studied in the corridors of power became front-page news. Initially, the reaction was dismissive. Social media exploded with jokes and memes, late-night talk shows lampooned the concept, and commentators questioned the seriousness of such claims. But behind the satire lay a clear, strategic reasoning. Greenland was no longer only a remote land, it was a chess piece in the emerging Arctic order. Climate change was altering the landscape, melting ice and opening new shipping routes. Resources once buried under kilometers of ice were suddenly accessible. Russia and China were increasing their presence, both militarily and economically, signaling that control of the Arctic could define influence in the 21st century. In his press address, Trump framed Greenland as essential to U.S. national security. He emphasized threats from rival powers, suggesting that Denmark, while an ally, could not sufficiently defend the island against potential adversaries. His rhetoric was blunt and uncompromising, asserting that strategic interests demanded attention and implicitly action. While the words left ambiguity about specific plans, the message resonated with urgency. Greenland was not just a place on a map. It was a point of leverage in the balance of Arctic power. Implications for international relations were immediate. European governments reacted with caution and, in some cases, with alarm. Denmark, Greenland's sovereign overseer, reaffirmed that Greenland was not for sale, echoing the protests and concerns of the local population. The Greenlandic people, predominantly Inuits, have long fought for greater autonomy, and being discussed as a purchasable territory was seen as an affront to their sovereignty and identity. The strategic stakes could not be understated. Greenland houses critical military infrastructure, including the U.S. Air Force's Pitchifix Space Base, formerly Thule Air Base, which monitors missile threats and maintains early warning systems. The island's position allows oversight of both the Atlantic and the Arctic approaches, making it pivotal for national and allied defense networks. In addition, the potential for future resource exploitation, rare minerals, oil and gas deposits, adds an economic dimension to the security calculus. What was once considered distant and marginal has now emerged as central to military planning, economic strategy, and international diplomacy. Trump's remarks also illuminated the shifting nature of modern geopolitics. The 21st century is no longer defined solely by traditional land borders, but by strategic locations, technological dominance, and control over emerging frontiers. In this context, Greenland represents a convergence of historical precedent and modern necessity. Nations that command such points gain more than territorial control. They gain strategic foresight, leverage, and alliances, and the ability to project power across vast distances. The reactions from global actors were swift. France, through President Emmanuel Macron, expressed concern over what was perceived as a coercive approach to an allied territory. European Union officials questioned the reliability and trustworthiness of American commitments in light of the statements. Analysts around the world dissected every word, every inflection, every implication of the White House briefing. Was this posturing, or was it a prelude to concrete action? Such uncertainty sent ripples through international markets, diplomatic channels, and military assessments. Meanwhile, in Greenland, the sense of national pride and the assertion of sovereignty became a defining narrative. The islanders' response was one of unity and clarity. Greenland belongs to Greenlanders. Their government, alongside civic organizations, communicated firmly that foreign acquisition or sale would not be entertained. This declaration was not merely symbolic. It represented decades of political evolution, cultural preservation, and a gradual but deliberate claim to self-determination. The broader context of Trump's statements must also be considered against the backdrop of global tension. Russia has been reasserting itself in the Arctic, expanding military bases, and increasing naval exercises. China, declaring itself a near-Arctic state, invests in infrastructure and research, signaling long-term interest in the region. For the United States, Greenland is no longer merely strategic. It is essential to maintaining parity in a contested international arena. The press briefing underscored the notion that Arctic competition is not a distant concern, but a central focus for future national security planning. This moment, while framed as a discussion of one island, illustrates the intersection of history, politics, and identity. Greenland has been historically overlooked, yet its significance persists. From the Cold War to contemporary strategic calculations, the island exemplifies the ways in which geography shapes destiny. Trump's rhetoric, whether interpreted as serious policy or aggressive posturing, has reignited debates about sovereignty, the limits of power, and the obligations of allied nations. Moreover, the tension surrounding Greenland reflects broader questions about international order in the modern age. As nations navigate competition, technological innovation, and environmental transformation, previously peripheral regions become central. Control over strategic locations like Greenland is not merely about land. It is about influence, projection of power, and shaping the rules of engagement in the decades to come. The Arctic, once a frozen frontier, now represents both opportunity and risk, a stage on which history and modernity converge. At the White House podium, Trump's tone was resolute. He did not frame his statements as suggestions or proposals. They carried the weight of imperatives, of actions that could alter diplomatic calculations. Reporters captured every pause, every emphasis, knowing that these words would be dissected globally. In the hours following, news agencies across Europe and Asia analyzed the implications. Military analysts projected scenarios, and policymakers evaluated potential responses. Greenland had moved from the periphery to the center of global strategic consciousness. Yet, amidst the political calculations, the human dimension remained. The residents of Greenland, who had adapted to centuries of harsh climate and complex colonial legacies, were now stakeholders in a renewed discussion of power. Their voices, asserting sovereignty and cultural identity, provided a necessary counterbalance to strategic considerations. In this interplay between global strategy and local agency, the dynamics of modern geopolitics became vividly apparent. Power is exercised not only through statements and deployments, but also through recognition of rights, identities, and histories. Trump's remarks also underscored the changing nature of diplomacy in the 21st century. Coercion, negotiation, alliance management, and public posturing now intertwine in ways that can escalate tensions rapidly. What may have once been handled through quiet channels now unfolds in real time across media networks, social platforms, and global news cycles. The Greenland example demonstrates how a single statement can ripple across continents, affect relationships, and redefine strategic priorities. It is a reminder that in an interconnected world, information itself becomes a tool of influence. In the days that followed the press briefing, multiple dimensions of the Greenland issue unfolded. European leaders debated appropriate responses. Greenland's government issued clarifying statements. Military analysts around the world reassessed Arctic deployments. The conversation extended from the halls of government to think tanks, universities, and public forums, each dissecting implications for sovereignty, security, and diplomacy. Greenland, silent for so long, had become a center of debate and decision-making. From the perspective of historical narrative, this moment reflects a continuity in global politics. Powerful nations have always sought advantage in key regions. Strategic locations, whether islands, ports, or mountain passes, have been repeatedly contested. Greenland, with its unique combination of geography, resources, and military relevance, exemplifies the intersection of historical ambition and contemporary strategic necessity. Trump's statements, in essence, revived a centuries-old conversation, reframed for the challenges and technologies of today. The significance of Greenland also illuminates the broader Arctic context. The melting ice, new maritime passages, and climate-induced accessibility create both opportunities and vulnerabilities. Nations must weigh security imperatives against diplomatic obligations, economic incentives against environmental responsibilities, and historical precedent against modern realities. In this matrix, Greenland is not merely land. It is leverage, a barometer of influence, and a symbol of contested authority in the modern world. By addressing reporters with unwavering confidence, Trump signaled that Greenland was no longer a theoretical concern, but an active consideration in U.S. strategic thought. Whether interpreted as a policy initiative, a negotiation tactic, or a strategic signal, the implications were clear. The Arctic is a theater of competition, and Greenland is its keystone. The island's future would be shaped not solely by geography, but by decisions made in capitals thousands of miles away, by statements delivered from podiums, and by the interplay of history, sovereignty, and power.